The sharp click of high heels on concrete cut through the steady hum of fuel pumps before I ever looked up from the register. A white Cadillac SUV rolled to a stop beside Pump 4, its chrome wheels crunching over loose gravel near the edge of the lot. The smell of gasoline mixed with fresh coffee from the station cafe as customers moved in and out through the glass doors. My station sat just outside the gates of Willow Creek Estates, one of those upscale HOA communities where every mailbox matched and every lawn looked like it had its own barber. The woman stepping out of the SUV carried herself like she owned more than the vehicle. She wore a cream-colored blazer despite the heat, designer sunglasses, and the expression of someone who expected the world to move when she spoke. Two younger HOA board members followed behind her carrying clipboards. One of them pointed toward my station sign, while the other took photos with a phone. The security camera above the entrance quietly tracked every movement. The woman marched inside without glancing at the fuel receipt printing from the pump. The marble tile beneath her heels clicked with every step. She stopped at the counter and slid her sunglasses onto her head. "Put Pump 4 on the community account," she said. Not asked. Ordered. I looked at the screen. $87.43. "There isn't a community account," I said. Her smile tightened. "I'm Brenda Holloway, president of Willow Creek HOA." She waited as if that explained everything. Behind her, a contractor in paint-stained work clothes paused beside the coffee station. A truck driver carrying a breakfast sandwich slowed down enough to listen. I nodded once. Still $87.43. One of the board members laughed under his breath like I had just made a joke. Brenda leaned forward. "Local businesses support the community. Every owner around here understands that." The automatic doors opened behind her with a soft hydraulic hiss as another customer entered. "I don't," I said. For a moment the station seemed quieter. The refrigerators hummed. A receipt printer buzzed. Somewhere outside, a fuel nozzle clicked. Brenda's eyes moved across my work shirt, my worn boots, and the old pickup visible through the front window. I knew that look. She had already decided exactly who she thought I was. "Let me explain this in terms you'll understand," she said. "Your business survives because of Willow Creek residents. Refusing a reasonable community request is a very poor decision." I slid the printed receipt across the counter. "Payments due before you leave." One of the board members shook his head. "Unbelievable." Brenda stared at me for several seconds before pulling out her phone. "You clearly don't understand how things work around here." She tapped the screen and smiled. Not the smile of someone making a call. The smile of someone expecting a lesson to be taught. Outside, a patrol vehicle passed slowly on the county road beyond the station entrance. For the first time, one of my employees looked nervous. Brenda noticed it too and smiled wider. Then her eyes drifted toward a framed document hanging near the office door. She frowned for half a second before looking away, as if she thought she recognized something but couldn't quite place it. Brenda lowered her phone but didn't make the call yet. She wanted an audience first. The station lights reflected off the polished floor while the ceiling fans pushed around the familiar mix of coffee, gasoline, and fresh pastry smells from the bakery case near the entrance. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled past on the county road, its diesel engine fading into the distance. Brenda glanced through the front window toward my pickup truck parked beside the air pump station. The truck was a 20-year-old Ford with faded paint, a dented rear bumper, and enough miles on it to circle the country more than once. She looked at it and immediately decided who I was. "Let me guess," she said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Family-owned little station. Barely hanging on. You people always think rules don't apply to you." One of the board members chuckled. I said nothing. The truth was far less dramatic. That old truck had belonged to my father before it belonged to me. The worn leather keychain hanging from my belt had been his too. He bought the station 40 years earlier when the property was nothing more than 2 pumps, a gravel lot, and a small repair garage. Every expansion, every new fuel island, every brick in the convenience store had been built through years of work. My father used to keep a handwritten notebook behind the counter. I still had it in the office safe. Every major repair, every fuel contract, every improvement. For decades of history written in blue ink. Brenda saw a man in work boots. The customers saw a station owner. Only the audience knew the station represented a lifetime of family effort. Brenda pointed toward the security cameras mounted in each corner of the store. "You should be careful how you conduct business," she said. People can lose permits over the wrong kind of complaint. The contractor standing by the coffee station raised an eyebrow. Even he seemed uncomfortable with where this was going. One of my younger employees shifted nervously behind the register. I reached over and straightened a stack of receipts. Payment is still due. Brenda smiled again. You really don't understand your position. Her gaze drifted across my faded work shirt. The name patch stitched above the pocket simply read Cole. Nothing else. No title. No credentials. No reason for her to think twice. Outside, the wind pushed against a row of American flags near the pumps. Their fabric snapped softly in the afternoon air. The cameras continued recording. Every word, every expression, every threat. Brenda stepped closer and lowered her voice. Willow Creek has influence in this county. We support businesses that cooperate. Businesses that don't cooperate tend to have problems. One of the board members nodded as if this was perfectly normal. I opened the register drawer, counted change for another customer, and handed over a receipt. The customer thanked me and left. Brenda looked irritated by how little reaction she was getting. Then her eyes landed on a framed certificate partially visible through the office doorway. The plaque sat beside several old photographs of the station from decades earlier. She narrowed her eyes. For a second, she seemed curious. Then she dismissed it. Whatever she thought she saw clearly didn't fit the conclusion she had already formed. She pulled out her phone again. This time her thumb moved directly toward the emergency call screen. As she did, the afternoon sun shifted through the front windows and illuminated a small brass plate mounted beside the office door. One of the board members glanced at it and frowned. Brenda, he said quietly, what does that sign mean? She didn't even look. And that was her first real mistake. Brenda pressed the call button and lifted the phone to her ear while the soft hum of the refrigeration units filled the silence around her. Outside, fuel pumps clicked as customers topped off their tanks. A pickup pulling a landscaping trailer rolled past the front windows, gravel crunching beneath its tires before disappearing toward the highway. Brenda turned slightly so everyone could hear her side of the conversation. Yes, I'd like to report a business owner refusing service and creating a disturbance, she said. One of the board members folded his arms with a satisfied look. The other glanced again toward the brass plate beside my office door. The contractor near the coffee station stayed where he was. Nobody seemed eager to leave anymore. People were listening. I said nothing. Silence has a way of making loud people work harder. Brenda ended the call and slid her phone into her purse. Deputies are on the way. I nodded once. All right. The answer seemed to irritate her. She had expected arguing. Maybe anger. Maybe panic. Instead, she got a receipt still sitting on the counter waiting to be paid. The automatic doors opened with a hydraulic sigh. 2 road crew workers entered carrying dust-covered hard hats. The smell of asphalt followed them inside. One noticed the tension immediately. Everything okay? He asked. Brenda answered before anyone else could. We're dealing with a compliance issue. Compliance issue. Interesting choice of words. She had already begun framing the story. I picked up a clipboard from beneath the register and flipped through a few pages. What compliance issue? I asked. Then I waited. Brenda blinked. The pause stretched longer than she expected. Your refusal to cooperate with community standards. Another silence. The contractor frowned. Community standards for a gas station? He asked. Brenda ignored him. I glanced toward the security monitor mounted behind the counter. 8 camera feeds covered every angle of the property. Fuel islands. Parking lot. Store entrance. Register area. Every second automatically archived. Camera must always see. My father used to say memories fail, but recordings don't. I asked another question. Did you receive authorization for free fuel? Silence. Brenda's smile weakened slightly. The HOA represents over 400 homes. I waited again. No argument. No explanation. Just space. People naturally try to fill silence. Brenda did exactly that. Businesses benefit from our residents. Another pause. The board member nearest her shifted his weight. The contractor looked less convinced than before. I opened a drawer and removed a thin notebook. Nothing dramatic. Just daily station records. Fuel deliveries. Vendor access. Contractor approvals. Visitor notes. The same system we had used for years. Did anyone from this station approve the charge? I asked. Silence. Brenda's confidence slipped another inch. Approval shouldn't be necessary. That answer landed badly. Even the road crew workers exchanged a look. Outside, A service technician wearing a fluorescent vest walked past Pump 4 and scanned the equipment with a handheld device. His contractor authorization badge swung from a lanyard around his neck. Authorized. Documented. Recorded. Everything here left a trail. The board member who had noticed the brass plate finally stepped closer to it. He squinted. Then he looked at me. Then back at the sign. His expression changed. Not fear. Not recognition. Suspicion. As if something about Brenda's version of events suddenly stopped making sense. And for the first time since she walked into the station, someone standing beside her appeared to wonder whether she was actually in the right. At first glance, it probably looked like nothing more than a disagreement over a tank of gas. A stubborn station owner. An angry HOA president. That was certainly how Brenda wanted everyone to see it. But while she stood near the counter checking her phone every few seconds, waiting for law enforcement to arrive, pieces of a much larger picture were already sitting in plain sight. Outside, the steady flow of vehicles continued through the fuel islands. A minivan pulled away from Pump 2. A delivery van backed toward the storage entrance with a series of electronic beeps. The wind pushed dust across the edge of the lot, while the American flags snapped against their poles. Inside, the security monitors quietly cycled through camera feeds. Every screen showed another angle, another record, another version of the truth. The board member standing closest to the brass plate finally walked over and read it carefully. His forehead creased. Before he could say anything, the automatic doors opened with a soft hiss and another customer stepped inside. It was Greg Lawson, a security contractor who had worked throughout Willow Creek for years. He carried a tablet under one arm and stopped immediately when he recognized Brenda. Board meeting today? He asked casually. Brenda straightened. Community business. Greg glanced around the store. Then he noticed the tension. Then he noticed the cameras. Then he noticed me. Everything okay here? He asked. Nobody answered right away. That silence seemed to tell him enough. His tablet chimed with an incoming notification. He looked down and frowned. Funny timing, he said. I was just reviewing access reports for Willow Creek. Brenda's expression tightened slightly. The contractor near the coffee station looked interested now. Greg scrolled through the screen. Gate logs have been a mess lately. Brenda immediately interrupted. That has nothing to do with this. Maybe it didn't. Maybe it did. The important thing was how quickly she wanted the subject dropped. Greg shrugged and slipped the tablet under his arm again. But now people were paying attention. A few feet away, one of the road crew workers leaned against the beverage cooler while pretending to browse energy drinks. Outside, another vehicle entered the lot. Inside, another phone buzzed. Information kept moving. People kept arriving. The story kept growing. Then the office printer suddenly activated behind me. A stack of routine account paperwork emerged into the tray with a mechanical whir. Brenda glanced toward it. So did everyone else. Most of the documents meant nothing to anyone but me. Fuel invoices, vendor records, property filings. Yet one page near the top carried a county seal visible even from several feet away. The board member noticed it. County records? He asked. I nodded once. Nothing more. He looked back toward Brenda. For the first time since arriving, he seemed uncertain. Not because he knew the whole story. Nobody did yet. But because pieces were beginning to appear that didn't fit the version Brenda had been selling. Then another voice entered the conversation. Actually, Greg said, looking up from his tablet again, there was something strange about the HOA records last month too. Brenda turned toward him immediately. Too quickly. Too defensively. The movement itself drew attention. The contractor near the coffee station lowered his cup. The road workers stopped pretending not to listen. Even my employees exchanged glances. First it looked like a dispute. Then records appeared. Then another person stepped forward. Then questions started forming. And standing in the middle of my station, surrounded by cameras, documents, gate reports, and witnesses, Brenda no longer looked like someone solving a problem. She looked like someone hoping nobody asked the next question. The atmosphere inside the station shifted in a way that had nothing to do with gasoline or coffee anymore. The refrigeration units continued their steady hum. Customers still came through the automatic doors. Receipts still printed. Yet the center of gravity had moved. People were no longer watching a disagreement. They were watching a puzzle. Greg set his tablet on a nearby table and pulled up a series of access reports. The screen illuminated his face while vehicles continued moving through the fuel islands outside. Brenda crossed her arms. This has absolutely nothing to do with HOA operations, she said. Nobody responded immediately. Silence again. The kind that forces people to keep talking. Greg zoomed in on a map displayed on the screen. Actually, that's not entirely true. The board member nearest him stepped closer. The contractor followed. Even one of the road workers drifted over from the beverage cooler. The image showed Willow Creek's main entrance. Security gate. Visitor lane. Service access road. Normal enough. Then Greg tapped another layer. Additional property boundaries appeared. Thin colored lines crossed the screen. Easements. Utility corridors. Access routes. Suddenly the map looked more complicated than anyone expected. Brenda immediately tried to redirect the conversation. We're here because he refused payment arrangements. Greg ignored her. Funny thing about these records, he said. I started checking them after a county audit request came through a few weeks ago. That got everyone's attention. County audit. Different scale. Different stakes. Not personal anymore. The board member looked confused. Audit for what? Greg zoomed further. Access control documentation. Outside, a fuel truck rolled into the rear service lane. Its air brakes hissed as it stopped beside the underground storage fill ports. Through the front windows, the giant tanker became an oddly perfect backdrop to what was unfolding. Infrastructure. Access. Ownership. The real story. Greg pointed toward a narrow strip highlighted on the map. This service corridor right here. Brenda's jaw tightened. That's HOA property. Greg didn't answer. Instead, he opened another file. A county parcel overlay appeared on screen. Then another. Then another. Layer after layer. Visual evidence. No speeches. No dramatic explanations. Just records. The contractor leaned forward. Wait. Greg nodded. Exactly. The highlighted corridor wasn't labeled as HOA property at all. It was marked as a private access parcel connected to multiple utility easements and service agreements. The board member frowned. That's impossible. Greg shrugged. According to county records, that's what it says. Brenda immediately stepped forward. County maps are wrong all the time. That response landed badly, especially because everyone knew she normally treated official documents as absolute truth whenever they benefited the HOA. Echo effect. The same paperwork she used to enforce authority was now raising questions about that authority. Greg opened another document. Then another. Email confirmations. Survey references. Maintenance agreements. Pieces of a puzzle that stretched back years. None of them proved everything. Not yet. But they pointed in one direction. The original argument over free fuel suddenly looked insignificant. A symptom, not the disease. The real issue seemed to be that Willow Creek had been operating under assumptions nobody had questioned for a very long time. Assumptions about access, about control, about ownership. Then the office printer activated again. A single page emerged from the tray and slid onto the stack with a soft mechanical click. The county seal sat prominently at the top. Beneath it was a detailed parcel map. Bright boundary lines crossed directly through an area every Willow Creek resident believed belonged to the HOA. The board member stared at it. Greg stared at it. Even Brenda stared at it. Because if that map was accurate, it had the power to change everything. Nobody touched the parcel map for several seconds. The printer sat silent. The fuel pumps outside continued their steady rhythm. A pickup rolled away from pump 6. A delivery driver crossed the parking lot carrying a clipboard. Life kept moving, but inside the station, everything seemed focused on that single sheet of paper. Greg carefully lifted the document and spread it across a nearby table. The county seal sat at the top. Parcel boundaries stretched across the page in bold colored lines. Easement corridors appeared in yellow. Utility routes in blue. Ownership parcels in red. The board member who had been standing beside Brenda leaned closer. That can't be right, he said quietly. Greg pointed toward the lower corner. Recorded with the county land office. Revision filed August 14, 2011. He tapped another section. Updated survey certification attached March 22, 2018. Then another. Verified during insurance renewal review in 2022. Every statement came from the page itself. No opinions. No arguments. Just records. Brenda immediately reached for the oldest defense available. Maps get corrected all the time. Greg nodded. They do. Then he opened another file on his tablet. A scanned document appeared on the screen. The heading read Recorded Access and Utility Agreement. Beneath it sat a county filing number. Beneath that were signatures. The contractor standing nearby adjusted his glasses. Who's that? Greg zoomed in. One signature belonged to a developer who had built the original Willow Creek entrance nearly 20 years earlier. Another belonged to the previous owner of the service corridor parcel. A third signature belonged to the county clerk who recorded the agreement. The document date was May 3, 2007. The board member swallowed. What does it mean? Greg turned the tablet around so everyone could see. It means the HOA received access rights. He paused. Not ownership. The distinction landed like a weight. Outside, a fuel tanker driver closed a compartment hatch with a metallic clang. Inside, nobody spoke. Access rights. Not ownership. For years, those two ideas had apparently been treated as the same thing. Brenda shook her head. That interpretation is wrong. I still hadn't raised my voice once. Instead, I walked into the office and returned carrying a worn black binder. The leather edges showed decades of use. My father's handwriting filled labels along the spine. I placed it on the counter and opened it. Plastic sleeves protected old property records, survey certifications, insurance endorsements, utility maintenance agreements. History preserved one page at a time. I turned to a document dated September 18, 1989. The title sat clearly across the top. Warranty deed. Beneath it was a legal description matching the highlighted parcel on the county map. Another page followed. Trust transfer document. Signed July 11, 2003. Then another. County property tax assessment record. Continuous ownership. Continuous filings. Continuous documentation. The board members stared at the paperwork. The service corridor belongs to this property? Greg nodded slowly. According to every document I've seen. Brenda looked from the binder to the map to the tablet screen. For the first time since entering the station, she stopped talking entirely. The authority she had walked in with had depended on one assumption. The documents sitting in front of her were dismantling that assumption piece by piece. Then Greg opened one final attachment linked to the county filing. An easement expiration review completed 3 months earlier. A highlighted note appeared near the bottom. The board member read it aloud. HOA access rights remain conditional upon compliance with recorded agreement terms. He looked up. Conditional? Nobody answered immediately. They didn't need to. The paperwork already had. 3 days later, the dispute had outgrown my gas station completely. The emergency board meeting at Willow Creek filled the community clubhouse beyond capacity. Folding chairs scraped across the floor. The air conditioning hummed overhead. Papers rustled. A projector fan whirred against the back wall. Residents who normally skipped meetings showed up early and stood along the sides of the room. What began as a disagreement over a tank of fuel had become something else entirely. At the front of the room, Brenda sat in her usual position at the center of the board table. For years, that seat had symbolized control. Now it looked more like a spotlight. A projector screen displayed the county parcel map Greg had uncovered. Bright property lines stretched across the image while residents whispered among themselves. Every few minutes, another phone vibrated. Another email arrived. Another rumor spread. The board's attorney attended remotely through a video screen mounted near the stage. His voice echoed through the room speakers. Our immediate concern is exposure, he said. Exposure. Not authority. Not compliance. Exposure. The word changed the mood instantly. Several board members shifted in their seats. One began flipping through documents with visible urgency. Another repeatedly checked property insurance summaries sitting in front of him. Money changes sides. That was the moment I realized the real panic had started. For years, people worried about HOA fines. Now the HOA was worried about legal bills. The attorney continued. If recorded access agreements were misunderstood or improperly represented, liability questions may arise. Liability. Another word nobody enjoyed hearing. The room grew quieter. A former board treasurer named Linda Mercer stood from the audience and raised a hand. She had served on the HOA years before Brenda became president. I remember discussions about the service corridor, she said. Several heads turned. The projector light reflected off her reading glasses. We were always told it belonged to the association. She paused. But I never personally saw a deed. That statement landed harder than any accusation. Not because it proved wrongdoing. Because it showed how assumptions had replaced verification. Then another document appeared on the projector screen. An attorney letter delivered that afternoon. The date sat clearly at the top. The subject line referenced review of recorded easement conditions. The room became completely silent except for the low hum of the projector. Residents read along as portions were displayed. Questions regarding compliance. Questions regarding maintenance obligations. Questions regarding access rights. Every paragraph seemed to create 3 more questions. Brenda attempted to redirect discussion several times. Each attempt failed. Nobody wanted to talk about landscaping violations anymore. Nobody cared about community standards. They cared about insurance. They cared about property values. They cared about whether years of decisions had been based on inaccurate assumptions. The physical layout of the room changed as the evening progressed. Board members who once sat shoulder to shoulder gradually leaned away from Brenda. Residents gathered around the projector instead of the board table. Documents circulated from hand to hand. The center of authority moved without anyone announcing it. Near the end of the meeting, another notice appeared on the screen. Internal review pending. Access agreement compliance investigation. Board records audit. The word seemed almost unreal. Willow Creek system had always appeared untouchable, permanent, automatic, self-protecting. Yet now every mechanism that once reinforced HOA power was turning inward. Records, agreements, reviews, attorneys, audits. By the time the meeting adjourned, nobody was talking about controlling residents anymore. They were talking about controlling damage. And for the first time in a very long time, Willow Creek's leadership no longer seemed certain they controlled anything at all. 2 weeks after the emergency meeting, the system began doing what systems are supposed to do when enough verified records reach the right desks. It corrected itself. The first visible sign appeared in every Willow Creek resident's inbox at exactly 8:03 a.m. Phones buzzed across the neighborhood. Tablets lit up on kitchen counters. Laptop screens refreshed. The subject line was simple: official board correction notice. The document acknowledged that previous descriptions of certain access areas had not accurately reflected recorded county filings and easement agreements. No dramatic language. No accusations. Just corrections. Yet everyone understood what it meant. The projector screen that had dominated the emergency meeting was replaced by something even more powerful: written recognition. Throughout the day, residents forwarded the notice to neighbors. Screenshots circulated. Printed copies appeared on clubhouse bulletin boards. The correction letter was only the beginning. 3 days later, a second announcement arrived. This one came from the board attorney's office. Effective immediately, all claims involving access corridors, service routes, and utility easements would require independent document verification before enforcement actions could occur. New procedures, new review requirements, new approval standards. The very paperwork process the HOA had spent years using to regulate others was now being used to regulate the HOA itself. Echo effect complete. Every form, every record request, every compliance review now worked both directions. Inside the clubhouse conference room, folding chairs scraped against the floor while board members reviewed updated governance policies. Air vents hummed overhead. Pages turned. Pens clicked. Nobody talked much. The newest policy draft required supporting county documentation before property-related authority claims could be issued. Another required attorney review for easement disputes. A third required board-wide approval instead of unilateral action. Authority that once flowed through a single office now moved through multiple layers of verification. Then came the financial review. Insurance representatives requested clarification regarding access obligations. Maintenance agreements were re-examined. Legal fee estimates appeared in spreadsheets projected across conference room screens. The conversation shifted completely. Nobody discussed control anymore. They discussed risk, property values, coverage requirements, budget exposure, liability reserves. Money had changed sides. The same residents who once worried about HOA enforcement were now asking whether the HOA had properly protected community interests. A month later, a revised parcel information packet was distributed to every homeowner. New maps, updated references, verified easement descriptions. The corrected materials clearly distinguished ownership from access rights. Visual victory. What had once existed as assumptions now existed as documented facts. Even the physical environment reflected the change. New signs appeared near the service corridor entrance. Updated language replaced old wording. Visitor procedures were revised. Access notices referenced recorded agreements instead of ownership claims. Every change was small by itself. Together, they represented something much larger. Official recognition. Near the end of the review process, the board voted to temporarily suspend independent enforcement authority related to corridor access matters until all audits were completed. The decision appeared in meeting minutes, attorney summaries, and resident updates. No speeches, no confrontations, just process, just governance, just records producing consequences. By then, Brenda still attended meetings, but she no longer controlled the conversation. Questions came from residents. Answers came from attorneys. Decisions came from documented reviews. The mechanisms she once relied upon had become neutral. The system belonged to the records now. And standing in that clubhouse beneath the quiet hum of fluorescent lights, everyone could finally see the same thing. The story was no longer hers to shape. 6 months later, the gas station looked almost exactly the same as it had on the day all of this started. The fuel pumps still clicked as customers filled their tanks. The coffee machine still released that familiar roasted smell every morning before sunrise. Delivery trucks still rolled through the service lane with the same low diesel rumble. The security cameras still watched quietly from their corners, recording everything without opinion or emotion. That was probably my favorite part. The property had not changed because it never needed to. The truth had been there the entire time. One clear autumn morning, I stood outside near Pump 4, the same pump where Brenda's SUV had stopped months earlier. The sky was bright. A light breeze moved across the lot. The American flags near the roadway snapped gently against their poles. Across the highway, traffic moved at its usual pace. Nothing dramatic. Nothing extraordinary. Just normal life continuing exactly as it should. Near the entrance sat one of the new access signs approved after the review process concluded. The language matched the recorded agreements precisely. No assumptions. No exaggerations. No claims beyond what the documents actually recognized. That small sign probably represented the entire story better than anything else. Accuracy had replaced confidence. Verification had replaced assumption. Inside the station office, the black binder still rested on the shelf where my father had always kept it. The same warranty deed. The same trust documents. The same survey records. The same signatures. The papers had not changed. People had simply started reading them. A few weeks earlier, the final board review report had been released to residents. The report confirmed the corrected property descriptions, adopted the revised procedures, and formally recognized the documented access agreements exactly as recorded with the county. No celebration followed. No dramatic confrontation. No grand speeches. The process simply ended because the records had finally aligned with reality. Brenda was no longer serving in the same leadership role she once held. The board had reorganized. New review procedures remained in place. Independent verification requirements remained in place. The corrections stayed. The records stayed. The property stayed. One afternoon, Greg stopped by for coffee. We stood near the front windows watching vehicles move through the lot. A landscaping crew filled their truck. A family bought snacks for a road trip. A service technician checked equipment near the rear access lane. The same corridor that had caused so much confusion now operated under clearly documented procedures everyone could see. Nobody argued about it anymore because there was nothing left to argue about. The documents answered the questions before opinions had the chance. As the sun dropped lower, golden lights stretched across the concrete and reflected off the station windows. The camera above the entrance quietly tracked another customer walking through the doors. The familiar hydraulic hiss sounded as the doors opened and closed. The same sound that had been there on the first day. The same sound that remained now. I looked across the property my family had maintained for decades and thought about how little real authority has to announce itself. Real authority does not come from titles, assumptions, threats, or confidence. Real authority comes from records, deeds, contracts, surveys, agreements, things that remain true whether people acknowledge them or not. The flags moved again in the breeze. A fuel nozzle clicked off in the distance. The entrance doors opened one more time with their familiar hiss. Order had returned not because someone won an argument, but because the facts were finally allowed to do their job. What would you have done? Have you ever dealt with an HOA like this? Let me know in the comments. Patience beats arrogance. Documentation beats intimidation. Paperwork beats power plays. Ownership beats assumptions. And somewhere above it all, the quiet camera continued recording exactly what happened.